Okay, so we're going to cover job costing, and these are the basic topics we're going to cover. This presentation will be available for Josiah to distribute after we're done here. We'll give him a copy of it. So we're going to review a number of things here. And again, we wanted to keep it short and concise. You can always refer back to the documentation. There's screen captures in there. Some of the terminology may not be clear to you, so we thought we'd start off with just making sure everybody's on the same page here. So we know what revenue is. We can see that in the area line summary on the very right-hand column. We also have the ability to look at estimated costs. If we turn the area cost checkbox, turn that on. Matter of fact, if you turn the $T checkbox on, you can see both $T and cost. Actual cost. Getting an echo here, Josiah.
I think we got it taken care of.
Okay, thank you. Actual costs, we're going to talk about that, but that typically is dealt with and reviewed after the install and all the inventory has been properly managed. We have estimated margin, actual margin. However, there's a little caveat here in that Action Flow is not an accounting package. It's not an all-inclusive package. We don't have payroll. We don't have labor. We don't have true overhead expenses. So actual margin is a bit of a misnomer, but we think we can do a pretty good job of getting close. $T, of course, we have the estimated, which is the revenue less the estimated material costs, and that's going to give us our throughput. And then we have actual $T, which is what we're going to basically look at after the install and the inventory has been managed for us. Okay, so the question always comes up is, you talk about estimated and then you talk about actual. What's the difference and when is one estimated and when is one actual? Well, estimated basically is at the time you're building the area. Very rarely are you going to know the actual cost at the time you create the area, unless you know that the tagged inventory, like for instance on slab pricing, is the actual slab you're going to use, and you will not create a remnant, and there'll be nothing's going to change. At that particular point in time, you might be able to say that my estimated is the same as actual, but actual is typically managed after all the inventory has been tagged, remnants created, non-serialized inventory has been settled and put to bed, and we basically have it all buttoned up and we're done. So the last statement is probably the safest one, is job costing is never actually until the job has been invoiced and the area is locked. This way, you know for sure that none of the revenue figures are going to change, and the likelihood of changing the inventory and starting to mess with that after the fact is also pretty remote, but it still can happen, so we need to be aware of that. Okay, how do we set this up? It all starts basically back at this class. The class has an impact because we define waste there. The SKU definitely has a lot of impact from the standpoint of that's where our default costs go. And then we also have the ability to override those costs on a price list by price list basis. And I'll show you as we go through this how we do that. So basically here at the SKU class setup, you can see the column to the right labeled material waste allows us to define what we believe the average waste is on this Decton 2cm versus Pendle Quartz 3cm versus Style Porcelain 2cm. Notice we don't have that on sinks because typically we're not creating a remnant from it per se, and we don't have waste. So we're looking at items where typically we're sold 30 square feet of a particular countertop, but we're only going to produce, we're going to take 45 square feet to produce it. So the 45 to 30, which is 15 square feet difference, is what deemed to be the waste. But again, we don't know that until the job is actually fabricated, remnants are created, and we're done. So we're doing our best here to give an estimate so that your estimates and your area summary, et cetera, is giving you some number that looks reasonable. So that, again, that's projected. So material waste, it's important to understand that this only comes into play if an item is sold by the square foot. If you're selling an item by the slab, then depending upon the square footage that you tag and how you define the amount of material you need, that will dictate the waste for you. But on square foot items, we don't have that ability. So we're going to be using these waste factors to do the work for us. So I've kind of given you basically how the system computes that. So I just want to focus on, I have a material here that's $11.95 a square foot. I have a waste factor on this that's 25%. So if you jump down to the second bullet in the next section, we're taking $11.95 times the square footage, it's a 20 square foot top, plus the 25%. So the net effect is $298 is what our cost is going to be. The last bullet basically is doing it more at the square foot level. I am buying it at $11.95. I got that waste factor at 25%. So ultimately the system is going to think through that as being $14.94 per square foot as it compares the revenue to the potential T dollars that are available as it's including the waste. Okay. If you feel that that really isn't something you want to do, then just set your waste factor to 0 and you're good. Then you're looking at the raw cost, but you're not accounting for the typical waste that you would have on a job. So here's an example here. Here you can see I got my 20 square foot job, and that's this Pentyl quartz material. So there's my $298.75 that I had expressed on the prior page as to how the formula actually calculates and computes. Okay. Non-serialized sinks, however, are going to take their cost from the SKU items. So if you have a SKU item, in this case here, we got showing 3 sinks here, the actual unit cost that you see in the SKU items is what the system is going to use as its default cost when you add a non-serialized serial number to your area. One important thing to know as well is when we talk about costing of inventory, we know, for instance, that the slab comes in, as an example, at $10 a square foot, but we also have the ability to start managing the value of the remnant as it goes back in inventory. And there's different schools of thought. There's pros and cons to each one, and you know, it's more of a decision between you and the accounting team, and your maybe your CPA has some input on that. But you have the ability to define that your remnant is either going to be the same value as your parents, in this case 1965. If I create a remnant, the remnant's going to hold that same number, or I can devalue it by 50%, or I can simply say my remnants have no value. So those are your three variables that you have there. Okay, so keep that in mind as you're working through this as well. Again, this is more of a, I'm not going to necessarily read it to you per se, but serialized SKUs, each one sold by the slab, by the square foot. We're going to talk about calculation override unit cost here in a little bit. We've talked about non-serialized already. So when you add the green button to add your inventory details in the lower section of the area with slab pricing, this is where you're going to see the default cost, not including waste.
34. Their total rate of that, you're allowed to have 13.80.
Good to go, Josiah?
Yep.
Okay. So you're going to see more examples of this, but basically what you're trying to do here is on slab pricing, you have a lot more control over what the actual cost is, or what the cost is going to be, which is closer aligned to the actual cost, because you're defining the square footage of the material that you need, the percentage of the slab, or you can manage the default slab sizes in preparation for when that item actually gets tagged and moved forward onto the job. So here's where you can see I got the same material, same cost of $11.95. You can see here that my cost comes in from my material, and I'm going to go ahead and indicate here that I'm going to use 100% of this slab. So therefore, I'm going to come up with this number of $898.16, is going to be my cost that's going to be computed on my areas, okay? You also have the ability to change the percentage that you believe you're going to use from that slab. So if you believe you're only going to use 0.75% or 75% of that slab, then it's going to reduce the material cost that it's estimating on the area and reduce that accordingly. So in this case, it's going to be 673 versus 898 if I use 100% of it. And typically what people will do is they'll think in terms of 100%, 0.75 or 75%, 0.5, 50%, or 0.25 for 25%. I don't know anybody who's coming up with numbers like 0.33 or 0.4278. Keep it simple. You're either using a quarter of a slab, half a slab, 3/4, or using it in its entirety. It keeps it clean and keeps it simpler. Okay. And here we have the ability that we can actually go ahead and reduce the cost, still have 100%, and go there. So you have the ability on slab pricing to change that default cost to a lower number. So when would you want to do this? Well, typically, if you know you're on a large commercial project or you're doing a multi-unit job and you know that you're going to get your material at a little better price, you can't really well go back in the database and change those numbers just for that one job. You're going to go ahead here and make that alteration right here because you know you can purchase that slab at $9.25 a square foot rather than its default number. And now again, you're getting a lot closer to what you believe the cost is on this job for this particular color. So that's how you manage on slab pricing those variables. So remember, there's a default cost, okay? And again, we're just going to get into this cost override here. And what I'm going to do is actually going to bring up Action Flow here because I've got an example sitting here right in front of me. So hopefully you can see this on screen. Yes, Josiah? Okay.
Yep.
Here I have an example. This is a price list that's designated as being multi-unit. So it's special for those large projects. And in this case here, my default cost for my adhesive, for instance, is $26 a tube. And we know we go through a lot of adhesive, we go through a lot of those types of things on these large jobs. So we might be selling a couple of cases of adhesive rather than with a retail job where you're just absorbing a half a tube or a partial tube or whatever the case is. In this case here, maybe I've got to sell a case or two or three of this adhesive, and I know that I can get it at a better price. So in this case, on the price list, if you find the SKU and you scroll all the way to the right, which I've already done here, but you're on the left now, you scroll all the way to the right, you'll see there's a column labeled override unit cost. And in this case here, I've put a value of $20 per tube because I know if I buy in bulk, I can get a little better price. So I'm already going to go ahead and kind of favor my T dollars, if you will, with a more accurate number by doing that on a price list by price list basis. So each of your price lists that you have in the system, you can go ahead, find that SKU or that SKU class, if you will, if it's across the board. You can see I've got all my adhesive here in one category. I'm going to manually set that to $20. And if you find later on, maybe you're going to get it at $18 because you're buying such a volume for some of these projects, then you come in here, set that to 18, and now you have a new value on that price list to manage those scenarios. So that's what cost override is. We also use it if you're subbing something out to someone and they're doing jobs for you, which is typical of the Cambria process where you can fabricate some Cambria in your market, but you've got a client that is outside that jurisdiction and Cambria is fabricating it for you. Here's where you can override some of those costs because obviously they're not the same cost as you fabricating. So that's another instance where you can do that, and it does a nice job of getting you a little closer. So I've scoot over that here. There's our remnant conversation again, talking about how to devalue them. And here's the values you can enter, 0, 50, or 100. Okay. So here we talk a little bit about this distribution. And this is fairly major player that tickles multiple people in your organization. If you have a job that has 3 areas, I got area A, area B, and area C. Primary area A has 65 square feet of a particular color. Area B, same color, using 15 square feet, and area C, also same color with 15 square feet. So in this case here, I know I'm going to need 2 slabs. I'm not going to be able to do it with 1 or 1.5. I'm going to basically go ahead and commit 2 slabs to it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to indicate the first slab I need 100%, and the second slab I'm going to set it to 0.25. So on the first area, I need 1 1/4 slabs to fabricate that particular area. Area B also has 0.25. And area C, again, similar to B, also has 0.25. So in essence, on this job, I only need 1.75 slabs of the same material. This will do a couple of things for you. Again, gives you a little closer costing, as well as the side effect is our purchasers are going to then be able to run a report and know that I only need 1.75 square feet for this job. If I was to assign a full slab to area B and another one to area C, or not even worry about it, there's a good potential that the system's going to think I need a total of 4 slabs. Whereas here I'm controlling it by using this field called used percent, and I'm defining that as being 0.25 for the second slab, 0.25 on this one, 0.25 on that one. So it's going to give me a much better number to use. So here's where we say how it impacts others, okay? So purchasers use this number right here, inventory alerts report, it's a big deal, uses the these percentages to determine exactly how many slabs do they need. If you don't use that, then you're probably going to be overbuying and find out later on that you've overspent this month on purchases of materials that you really aren't going to realize the revenue for until a later period of time when those materials come in, okay? Non-inventory costs. So let's talk a little bit about what those are. So we are hiring a third party to fabricate for us. You might have an outsource. If your company doesn't offer solid surface or doesn't offer butcher block, but you're hiring those services out, then of course you do have some costs relevant to those items that you yourself are not fabricating internally. You also have contract installers, contract templaters. You may be paying commissions, things of that nature. And some companies will go ahead and come up with some values that they deem to be their overhead or total variable expenses is another term to use. So we might be able to have our accounting department help us look at some averages over the last 12 months for each of these primary parts of our company. We've got template, CAD and engineering, fabrication, installation, and potentially service call, where we can basically add this information into the system. And your account coordinators can help you with how you might do that and how that kind of gives you a little better, closer number to margin. Even though we're not a cost accounting package, we can do a fairly decent job of coming up with a number that is relatively close. And then once a year, we evaluate those numbers and update them accordingly. So moving forward, we're getting a better visibility of the estimated margins for the jobs or areas. So this also impacts what I call job costings, not materials, but they are factors that dictate if the job is going to cost us more or less. This is a feature I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about, but I want to open the door for you. There is a feature on the enterprise version called hourly definitions, and it was designed to be able to help define the amount of time required to produce the job in fabrication, in install, how long things take to do depending upon the size and scope, the square footage, the linear footage, maybe a particular edge profile takes longer than another edge profile. There is quite a bit of energy and time that goes into this, but it's well worth the return if you want to take your job costing to a much higher level, because we can also define the cost per SKU rather than coming up with these guess numbers that we're doing, we can say, hey, actually the runtime on the CNC for a bullnose edge is X per linear foot. And I know what my cost is, and I'm going to basically put that in so that when a salesperson or project manager enters a job for 30 linear feet of bullnose edge, it will not only compute the time, but it can potentially also compute the cost. So I'm going to put that on the account reps to work with you on that and help you talk about that and see if that's something you want to explore. Let's talk about reporting. We have numbers of reports or areas that you can look at. The easiest ones, obviously, is if we look at the area, you can click the cost checkbox or the $T checkbox. That'll give you your, if you have hourly definitions, that will give you some numbers. And you do have some understanding of margin and margin percentage. Excuse me. That kicks in as well. That can summarize to the job level, depending upon how you've got your configuration set for the job list. And obviously we do have some reports in our report module. We have job cost projected, and we do have job cost actual, which is looking at how you've managed the multi-item and the use percentage feature. Again, these are more advanced features. Work with your account reps and get them to talk a little bit about that and show you more information about that. We presented back in at the conference a new report we're working on, and we're still working on it. It's quite a complicated report, which will, when we're ready, we'll roll it out and give you kind of an announcement of something that might be a little bit more accurate, relevant to job costing, but right now, these are the two that we have. Okay, so this is just a rehash of kind of what I've already said out loud. But I just want you to make sure you understand the numbers you're looking at, like on the schedule, those are all estimated. The closest you're ever going to get relevant to material costing, if you will, or T dollars, is if you use slab pricing and you manage the percentage used, or you're controlling the cost as to what you believe that should be. So again, a big deal if you're tagging remnants or you're projecting to use a remnant, that cost could be different than what the actual SKU item itself might be. So there's a lot of things to consider, but you have a lot of control once you understand it of exactly how that's going to come together. Of course, this is a big thing. Our industry pretty much lives and dies by T dollars. A large percentage of the industry has adopted this. So this is just giving us a little bit more information. Again, it clarifies the definition, as well as giving you each of the items that we're looking at. Square footage does it one way. If you're simply calculating what a slab might be, but you have not tagged or allocated inventory, then you're going to get an estimate, whereas the last option is going to give you the real cost. That is the cost after you've tagged it, because all tagged inventory has a default cost, which you cannot manipulate. So those are predefined for you, and those are going to give you the actual ones there. I had a question asked of me not too long ago is, what can I see on the calendars? And some of you may already know this, others that do not. You can actually toggle on each of your schedules what you wish to show. So the price list itself defines the T dollars. I'm going to slip back into Action Flow here, and I'm going to show you in advanced settings on the price schedule here. So if you go to your price schedule or your price list and click on advanced settings, if you come down to the last option on the right, you'll see you have three flavors: stone, solid surface, and laminate. This would suggest that your price list is only reflecting the fab type. If you have a price list, for instance, that offers all materials, whether it's butcher block, whether it's solid surface, whether it's stone, then this isn't going to work for you. You do need to basically build your price list out by the fabrication facility that will be doing it for you. And then you can say, I'd like this to be stone. If you flag it as such, then the calendars will reflect the stone T dollars on the areas that are using that price list. If another area is using solid surface price list, then you're going to see on the calendars, I believe it's SST dollars or something like that. And laminate we use it for other things. So if the shop is a cabinet shop, since we don't have cabinet as an option, we'll just use laminate and make sure everybody understands that we've kind of hijacked that as our terms. You can also show margin if you wish on the schedule, and then square footage is typically as a default setting for schedule. So you do have some tools at your disposal to show a little bit more information, to give a feeling to your scheduled users as to what that might look and feel like. I'm going to stop right here. That's just the end of my condensed version of this, and say, if you have any questions, let's ask. Let's see what you got out there.
Feel free to unmute yourself or put it in the chat. I'm watching the chat.
Hey, Roderick. Curious, you said that it is impossible to manipulate the cost of serialized slabs.
Correct. Not
I've-
not within the area.
Right. But what I've been doing, obviously on the commercial side, I'm getting some slabs for cheaper when they're bundled,
Yep.
is I'm adding miscellaneous line items to manipulate that cost to accurately depict like what it costs us to do it. Do you see anything wrong with that?
Well, that doesn't change the fact that that particular serial number has a cost. Let's just use an example, as a cost of $10, right?
Mm-hmm.
So short of going into that purchase order and manipulating that, but that would not work very well if your accounting department has received the invoice from the vendor and you've already got the prices as per what you paid for it. So you're using other SKUs to massage that? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I'm just adding a miscellaneous line item to accurately find my cost to do the job before I apply a markup to find what I want to make.
Okay, you're using the markup feature. Okay, yeah. So that will be fine as long as that item, I know what you're talking about now, as long as that item is defined as a cost, then we're okay.
Yeah.
Right, if that item is part of the cost party and you want to do that, is that item $T-able, do you know?
It's just like a miscellaneous line that
Okay.
I'm adding. I'm just
We also
manipulating
want
the cost
maybe
and making the
make
revenue
one,
zero.
we also might want to make a particular SKU for you that is going to accomplish that, but also has the $T checkbox checked, so that that will then complement the overall $T on the job.
Okay.
Yep. Okay. Any other? I'm looking at the chat as well. I'm not seeing anything. So,
Roderick, just a quick question on the splitting materials between different areas.
yep.
The way we've been using it is, trying to align as best we can with kind of how the customers defined the areas they want us to work in, say kitchen and bath, or something along that
Sure.
line. But lumping all of the materials, the common materials, into one area.
Right.
So if we have a material that is between these two logical areas for a customer, that will allow us to do that, which seems like it's better aligned with how we would think about it and how they would think about it. But you're still limited to only one type of material per area module. That's correct?
Correct. So we'll go back to the example where we had 3 areas. The first area gets 2 slabs, and the second 2 areas only need a portion of that one. So using the use percentage is the best way to inform purchasing what you're really needing, as well as get a better accurate costing on your area and get your revenue where you want it. Are you familiar with the multi-item feature?
No.
Okay, that's the one that's going to help you distribute. So you've got 2 slabs tagged. The first slab you're going to consume on area 1. The second slab you're going to use partially on area 1, partially on area 2, and partially on areas 3. So if you go and look at the best way to do this, it can be done in multiple areas, but typically in the fabrication tab where you're looking at your job there, look at your areas, move that inventory line item that you've tagged, move a little to the right, and you can, on your second and third areas, you can select the serial number that's tagged to area A and say, I want to co-share that.
Got
Then
it.
do the same thing to area C, find the multi-item dropdown and select that. Now you're going to co-share that percentage for area C from area A. Again, if it doesn't make any sense, best to just walk it through with your account rep, or you and I can connect a little later on, but that's how you co-share. That feature is very powerful. You can also co-share another job from another customer that you're doing in a similar time frame, just by the fact that you're going to share that slab. So what that will avoid you having to do is create a remnant. That's always the challenge, because if you have your remnant valuation going to 0, guess what the second job is going to pick up for a true cost?
Right.
0.
Right. Got it.
If you use the multi-item feature, and again, if you're fabricating, usually it's within a reasonable time frame. I mean, I'm not suggesting months apart, but if you're fabricating job A on a Monday and job B on a Tuesday or Wednesday, then the multi-item feature is going to work very well for co-sharing a slab from job 1 across to job 2, and each one will then take home their appropriate ratio of costing. So we're getting into some pretty advanced type of stuff here, but that's how I would definitely work with your account rep. Or you can reach out to myself if you wish, and we can go over the multi-item functionality on tag slabs.
Got it. No, thank you very much.
Roger, we had another question in the chat. Rachel asked if slabs are being specifically ordered in for a job. Do you think the best route to go is to do slab cost versus giving them a square foot cost to account for all the material versus having remnants that may never get sold?
That depends on how the SKU is configured on that price list. Is that SKU being sold as a square foot or as a slab? That would dictate whether that's even possible. There are some advanced settings that you can explore that might help a little bit. In other words, on the fly, swip it from square footage to slab. That's something, again, you'll need to work out with your account reps and kind of review that and see if that's a feature you wish to explore. But if it's slab pricing, then you're 100% on. If it's square foot pricing, you've got some decisions you make. Some decisions you have to make.
So a lot of times we will have it in the price list as square foot, but so we're not using the inventory feature at this time yet, because we're kind of newer to the system. But if we're bringing in material for a customer and we just put it kind of down in the inventory while we're doing the layouts and then switch it over to slab, do you think that's probably the best way to go about it?
I think so. Hopefully you're going to move up to the enterprise version, which has inventory management and things like that, because I think if you do that, you'll already get in your mindset into that groove, which will get you there.
Yes, we are. I think we're there. We just haven't implemented.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
they
That's
just
right.
have their account manager is just slacking, and that is
Yeah.
me.
Yeah, right.
I was going to say, is that you?
Thank you.
Very good. Very good. Good question. Okay. Anything else coming up here? Okay. I'll get the presentation over to Josiah here later today, and he can disseminate it for us. I believe this is also going to be sent back as a YouTube video, correct?
That's correct.
Yeah,
Yeah.
That's good.
Thanks so much, Roderick.
Thank you very much. Appreciate everybody's time, and have a great day.